Hello and welcome to Politically Incorrect Knitters. My name is Ann Pinkava, joined by always by the lovely Deplorable Knitter, and also today joined by a very good friend of ours, Tara, who has her own wonderful podcast, which she will talk about later.
Hi. Hey, Tara. Thanks for joining us today. Before we start chatting, though, don't forget Ann and I are sponsored by Chicken Lady Fiber Arts. You can get one of her really cool ornament kits by commenting on the video. And it comes with everything you need. It's got yarn, it's got stitch markers. You just need your own needles. You'll get a measuring tape. There's a little mini skein in here, some stickers. It's a little bag of fun. And you can use the code BABY20PIK to get 20% off of anything in her shop. So make sure you check her out. And Anne has the winner for this for August. Anne has the winner for the August giveaway, which is the same kit.
Sure. August giveaway winner username is Christina Elzy 1316. So congratulations.
Congratulations. Email deplorableknitter@yahoo.com with your info so that I can get the package to you. Because if you send it to our real one, I'll never see it. I'll forget. So that's the true story. So Tara, tell us about yourself.
Yeah, I have been a crocheter for a very long time. In fact, I've been crocheting longer, like so long I don't even remember when I learned. And so I've been doing that. I'm married, I have two kids, and then I was just minding my own business and got patterns off of Ravelry and never really tried knitting. But then, like, the whole thing that blew up in 2019, and I learned who you were, DK, and I actually wanted to knit one of your hats. And so that's why I finally was like, okay, I need to learn how to knit. And
that's awesome. Which hat was it?
The Trump censored hat.
That was a good one. I really enjoyed it.
It is a good one. And it was not the first thing I knit, but I did eventually knit it, and I really like it. It's a good pattern.
Oh, thank you.
That it kind of makes me laugh when Tara's like, hi, I'm just new here in the knitting thing, and I'm laughing because Tara is like one of the most stalwart knitters in the knitting wars. Like, she has been out there for years. It was her who invited me to the Unsafe Space knitting group when that was still a thing. That all of these different connections, Tara's like, no, like anything that goes on, Tara's like, nah, man, I got your back. I got this. We got this. We're going to coordinate. It's all good. That Tara is very, straightforward and knowledgeable about all things knitting war-esque.
Yeah, and I like to consider myself the John Hancock of the knitting wars. It's like, I don't want to get my hands dirty, but I will go and I will financially support everybody who needs it. Because I don't really want to get on social media and get into it with people. But I have bought a lot of yarn and a lot of patterns to support people, and that stuff's important, and especially when so many small businesses were targeted. And then I also joked, I'm like, if anyone dares take my house, it's all over. And then it's really going to get serious. But yeah, no one's taken my house yet, fortunately.
Okay.
That's good. So you're this big person in knitting, in the knitting wars community, but you've only been doing it for a few years. But you're like super prolific now, right? Like, you're always knitting.
Yeah, I'm always knitting. And I really like the fabric that knitting creates, like for garments. I do love crochet. I think it's great, like for blankets. I do like crocheted shawls, things like that, and toys. Even though I'm not really into the toys, but I would crochet a toy over knitting one any day.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. No, I don't make a ton of toys either, but when I need to, or somebody wants something, there's no way I'm going to knit that thing ever.
Yeah,
not going to happen.
Nope. Gonna crochet that baby.
But that's cool. So I think we're far enough into this podcast now that you can tell us what the name of your own YouTube channel is.
Yeah, my YouTube channel is called Yarn, Chicken, and Shit. Because, you know, I talk about yarn. I live out in the sticks and I have chickens and turkeys. And I will credit Tabitha at Murder Knits for my podcast name. Like, she came up with it and I loved it and thought it was funny. And it's shit spelled with a one instead of an I because Google did not like it to be spelled properly.
They are a little persnickety that way.
Yeah, they are.
A little bit.
That's okay. That just makes it more fun, I think. And yeah, so I talk about, you know, the usual knitting podcast stuff about what I'm working on and my yarn accusations. I do talk about stuff going on at the homestead, my chickens, because they're funny. They are very funny animals. And then I do what I call like shooting the shit. So I'll usually try to talk about something. And then I am Eastern Orthodox Christian. I'm actually a convert to Christianity as an adult, and I'm Eastern Orthodox. And so I do talk a bit about that. And I like to highlight an Orthodox saint. And I have been primarily focusing on the more modern saints because my husband is from Eastern Europe. Yeah. Hence, you know, the close ties to Orthodoxy just from that. But and Orthodoxy is not big in the United States, so a lot of these saints are not well known. And a lot of them are martyrs and saints because of communism. Oh. And like we don't even know how many people were martyred, particularly in Russia. I mean, it's probably millions, but they're uncounted because there are just so many, and there were just it was really bad. And you know, it was you know the blood of the martyrs is the seed of the church, and you know we're starting to see some things happening in Russia and other parts of the world where there has been some renewal. It's very small. It happens slowly, but some good things are happening. And I think a lot of it is because of all the suffering and the trials that the faithful experienced under the thumb of communism.
It's interesting. This might be a dumb question, but is this the same church that Zelensky is not allowing to practice anymore?
Yes. And that's it's a very difficult situation because my husband has family not far from where all this stuff is happening. And we're like, yeah, we don't want any war at all. And there's a split in the Orthodox Church in Ukraine. And like, there's all kinds of there's just a lot of geopolitical mess going on there, a lot of like religious mess going on that a lot of people in the West just don't understand. And I can't say that I really understand it as well as people from there either, but because of my ties to the region, I kind of get it a bit more. But like there's interference from like political interference, but also religious interference. And the ecumenical patriarch in Constantinople has been getting himself involved when in Orthodoxy, that's like a no-no. Like we do not have a pope. Like the individual like churches, like the national churches, like they govern themselves. And, you know, someone from another country, kind of a bishop, even though he is a patriarch and he's very important, That doesn't mean that he gets to get himself involved
Right.
in other people's business, essentially. And so there's some of that going on. So there's a split in Ukraine, and there is a group that is still loyal to the Patriarch of Moscow, which historically the Orthodox in Ukraine have been subject to his jurisdiction for hundreds of years. Right. And then there's the split off, and it's the ones that are loyal to the Patriarch of Moscow who are being persecuted.
Okay.
That makes more sense, because it didn't make sense why he was saying this church is no good, but if they're affiliated with the guy in Moscow, then that I understand that that's a conflict more than I was just understanding it like, oh, he's not letting them practice and do their stuff, and I'm like, but it makes more sense.
They were bombing churches, like shelling churches at Easter services. There have been a number of priests getting arrested. There's a very famous monastery, the Lavra Caves, that has been loyal to their Patriarch Kirill of Moscow. And I'm not even sure what the status is and where they're at right now, but the monks were told to leave. Like, basically they were being evicted, and they were basically like, no, like, make us.
Right. To confirm before you continue, when you say, they're bombing at Easter services, they is
Ukraine, like the Ukrainian military.
That's what I had figured, but I wanted to make sure that was, that isn't.
They were bombing their own churches?
No, the Ukrainian military, they're bombing. Well, they're Ukrainian Orthodox churches, but they're the ones that are still loyal to the Patriarch of Moscow.
Oh, that's messed up.
Yeah.
Wow, okay. That's crazy.
I think with things with Ukraine and Russia, that it's a much more brutal world than we're used to. And it's not, I don't know, it's not as easy to be happy for one side or another if this is not uncommon occurrences, I guess.
Yeah, it's a bad situation for everybody. And, sitting on the sidelines, I'm like, I don't really like anybody. Like, I don't like the fact that Russia invaded. Like, I don't like it. But I despise what the Ukrainian government is doing to its own people.
Right. Definitely.
And I can kind of understand. I mean, because this all started like long before Putin said, we're going to invade. Like, the government of Ukraine has been shelling the Donbass and, Eastern Ukraine, like, for years and years before anyone in the West really knew what was going on. And so when it happened, like, I really wasn't surprised at all. And I'm like, well, if someone's shelling me and then someone in a stronger country says, oh, well, you can have an election and we'll support you if you vote to split off, and, we'll send our military in to protect you. Like, you're kind of in a situation where it's like, which bad guy do I go with? Like, probably the one who's not shooting at me.
Wow, there's more to that than I even realized. All I ever heard was that, oh, he shut down the churches, but there's I'm sure so many situations are like that where there's so much to it, but I had no idea. It's insane.
Yeah, it's
and
been
it
bad
also
for a long
makes
time.
Yeah, it also makes weaselly statements like Mike Pence, when Tucker Carlson was interviewing him, and Tucker Carlson's like, "Hey, aren't you bothered by Ukraine shutting down church services?" And he's like, "Well, I talked to a guy in Ukraine, and everybody says that they're fine to do whatever." And I'm like, "Buddy, just
Yeah, he hasn't talked to the abbot of the Lava Cave Monastery.
Yeah. I think
nor
that he
I
hasn't
I
talked to many
mentioned,
people, honestly. I
yeah,
have
or I
issues with
mentioned
him.
there, even if Pence was in some way able to talk to one of the persecuted churches, under what sort of thumb screws would that guy be under to say, no, everything's fine, Mr. Pence. I really like, my arms and legs and my family where they are.
Right.
Exactly. Like this has always been a brutal part of the world. Like life has always been hard. And you know, coming from the West, you think like, the Eastern European, like the Russian or the Slavic mentality, it's like, oh, well, they're so negative and like, they all think that, everything is about death and there's no happiness or joy. I'm like, no, they can be very happy. They're actually very warm people. Like once you kind of get the walls down, but it's life has always been hard there, and they always have those defenses up, particularly in public. And they have long never trusted their governments. They've always been, like, for hundreds and hundreds of years, ruled by not very nice people. And, the Soviet Union and like the other Eastern Bloc communist governments were just the icing on the cake. Like they're probably worse than anyone else that they've had before. And, it's, yeah, like culturally, they're going to seem very different from us and be very negative. It's like, well, no, it's like they know that life is hard. Like life is full of suffering and there's like all kinds of bad stuff that happens. But that doesn't mean you don't live and you don't move forward. And it, like everyone, like they love their families, they enjoy their families and friends like everybody else, but they don't, um, like when they're walking around in public or out in public, like they're not smiling and happy like Americans usually are.
Blown my mind, and now I just don't have any other things to say about it because everything I thought I knew was over. So I'm gonna just be quiet for a minute. No, but I just like, yeah.
Sorry, go on. I was gonna say, so as we normally do, when things get darker, so we sort of skipped over a little bit, mentioning that. Sorry, I know that you have all these connections, but kind of back to the knitting as we are sometimes told to do. That so you started knitting, once the knitting wars kind of took off, and which it was, pre 2019, so pre-COVID, going into all of that stuff, and then suddenly having this, fledgling knitting community and all the ups and downs of that you were a part of.
Yeah, the last few years have been crazy. And like when COVID started, like I lived in the big city and after a few months when my husband was saying, I don't think this is going to end anytime soon. I'm like, okay, well, let's just go out to the country like for the summer. And we just never went back. We started building out like, the homestead basically. And now we have chickens and all that fun stuff. It's been really, really good for me and for my family. Like, I'm an introvert. Like, I don't need to be around a lot of people. And it's really helped me maintain my sanity through all of the crazy that's been going on because I can just go outside and everything is normal. And out there, people weren't going crazy like a lot of people in the big cities were with COVID. I For a long time I've always kind of thought and about um, how people like people living in the cities like all close together. I don't think we're really meant to live like that. And I think the farther removed you are from nature, the more likely of kind of getting a little crazy um, is. And that the closer you are to nature, like all the time in your daily life, I think the more grounded you are and the less susceptible to like some of these crazes are. And that's a lot of why when we left the city, it was really like a refuge where we could get sunshine and fresh air and just have peace.
Yeah. So you were in a city, but you're in a red state. So did it last? You are in a red state, right?
Yes, I was
Okay.
in a red state before, still in a red state, and it was not as bad as other places. I honestly, I feel bad for people who had to like live in like New York or California or some of these places where it was really bad. But in the bigger cities, you had more people who were kind of freaking out about it and enforcing things. And it was kind of weird. And I, but they were also like when COVID was over, they also kind of got over and got back to normal a lot faster.
Yeah. Me in my New York, I was out, where was I? The grocery store, and people, like half the people still had masks on. And I'm like, really? Really? We're doing this again? Like, it kind of ebbs and flows. And now it's getting into fall. So, everybody's like, uh-oh, it's a bunch of nonsense.
Yeah. And a lot of the masking and stuff, it was like in the big city, it was primarily pushed by the bigger businesses and like healthcare. And so that's where it lasted longer. Generally people got over it a lot faster. But a lot of times it was like the bigger companies that were enforcing this stuff when a lot of people were like, well, we're done and we've been done.
Yeah.
But in a lot of the smaller cities and towns, like it almost wasn't a thing. Now, like where we went to the country fairly early on, like the chief of police of the closest town and the county sheriff both came out and said, like, because even there, like they had, and this was very early on in COVID, there was like the mask mandates and social distancing mandates. But the chief of police and the sheriff both came out and said, look, we're not enforcing any of this stuff that's coming from the state capitol. However, there are laws against trespassing, harassment, and disturbing of the peace, and we are going to enforce those laws. So basically, don't be jerks.
Right.
And it was like there weren't jerks. And very few people wore masks, only in certain places where it was required, like going to the hospital, the doctor, whatever. And then, I mean, even the Walmart couldn't really make people do it. Like they could make their employees do it. But yeah, and even it was funny because it was around Easter. I think it was Easter 2021 when Walmart corporate was still trying to enforce a lot of the COVID stuff. And including like the capacity in the store. And like it was right before Easter, everyone in the whole county was at the one Walmart to do all of their shopping. And there was like a line a mile long out there because they were enforcing the capacity stuff. And I think that was like on the Thursday or Friday or something before Easter. And then
Everybody's
like,
catching germs in the line.
oh,
Right.
but get this, someone had to have complained because they stopped doing it. And that's one of the things with a small town. It's like you have someone who's a pillar enough in the community can kind of
You're like,
call up the
hey,
general manager of Walmart and say, I don't care what the idiots in corporate tell you. You need to let everyone do their shopping.
Right.
And that was probably about as crazy as it got outside of healthcare facilities.
Right.
And even Walmart had to back down.
Well, here at our Walmart, I mean, I'm in New York, so people were complying a lot more than in a lot of other states. But at our Walmart, they had people stationed at the doors, and I don't know how these people got the job because I would never have done it. They were like yelling at people going in without masks on. Like you couldn't pay me enough money to be the person that shouts at people, "Where's your mask? You need to wear a mask." Well, that's when I started wearing the red lipstick, which I don't have on today, but yeah, because that was the push around here is wear your red lipstick, don't put your mask on because this is a bunch of nonsense. But
Mm-hmm.
when you started, so you just went to the country just to get away. So you never intended to homestead, you never intended to necessarily, or was that something maybe in the future? But
We were originally planning on it like in the far future. Because my husband grew up under communism and he moved to the United States for me. And he moved to the US under the Obama administration. And he made the comment to me, like when we were, going through the paperwork process, because it took forever to get him the visa. He said, why should I go to the United States when your president is saying the same stuff that Ceausescu was saying? And I'm like, well, I really can't say anything because I'm like, well, you have a really good point. And his parents are the generation, like in his family, who left the farm to go to the city to work. And so growing up, he saw the difference in how people lived in the city versus in the country. And the people in the country were a lot more free than people in the city. So, like, they routinely had the power cut off just because, or the hot water cut off just because. They didn't have a lot of TV, like, usually just a few hours in the evening. But, like, even out in the country, like, they did have electricity. They didn't always have running water, but they did have electricity. And the power really wasn't cut off. Now, granted, the people living out there, if the power got cut off, they wouldn't care because they were still living mostly the way that they had been living for hundreds of years. So they didn't really care. But out there, like because of the ties to the family farms, like he always had food, even when there were other people who did not have food. I mean, he stood in plenty of lines. Like he was standing in line by himself, like for bread to buy bread in the city when he was like 4 or 5 years old. And just like in that, like that's very difficult to imagine. But that's just how it was. And so he knew, with this experience, what he experienced growing up, he wanted us to have a place to escape to if we needed and to kind of get away because even if things got bad, at least out in the country, we would be more free. And that's exactly how it played out during COVID. We were just more free.
So is he disturbed by all the things that are going on in the government as
Oh,
a person who
absolutely.
lived under it?
Absolutely.
So all the people who say that like Anna and I are conspiracy theorists, we're not that far off, right? Like a lot of the stuff it's the same playbook. They're just kind of tweaking it a little bit.
Yeah, it's a
Make it a
lot
little
like
more palatable.
if you look at the history of the communist revolutions, especially in Russia, a lot of the same stuff that is happening or has been happening over the last few years happened in Russia. It's really kind of scary. And like, okay, like there was one of the things, and I don't want your channel to get in trouble, but you know, like the whole Q thing
Oh yeah.
that happened. Like I knew right away, I'm like, this is BS. Because there was a similar operation. It's like basically a psyop that happened during the Russian Revolution. Okay. Where basically they were saying, oh, well, there's like like the white Russians, and you know, there's this plan going on in the background, and you don't need to do anything. Like they're gonna come in, they're gonna beat the Bolsheviks. And it prevented a lot of people from doing anything during their own civil war. And it really helped the Bolsheviks get into power. And you know,
yeah, it's amazing the force of, you know, psyops, however you want to call it, for doing nothing on both sides. It's do nothing, everything, you know, everything's going to be okay, or do nothing because you can't, you don't have enough power. That both of them have the same result.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's crazy though. I had no idea. Like, apparently you and I need to get together and just have a history lesson because there's so much stuff I just don't know.
I don't even know. But I actually learned a lot by there's an Orthodox channel that's run by a priest. And he kind of gets in trouble with the hierarchy in the US because he talks about and says things that, you know, the a little more, you know, that establishment type guys I don't like. But I'm like, if you look at church history, it's always like the ones that are like on the outs with the hierarchy, you know, who call people like they're the ones who always end up as saints. So like, come on. Like
it's always the rebels and outlaws and the rest of them.
Exactly.
That's like, hey.
Yep.
He did a series on basically lessons where and he was taking it off of a book that was written about the new martyr saints of Russia, which is translated in English, but it's not like you can go to a library and pick it up. Like I was able to get a PDF of it, but I don't even think it's a print. But he did a lesson on this, and so it kind of goes through the history, but also talks about the players. Sorry.
Just to pause, what's the name of the book and what's the name of the channel?
The channel is The Orthodox Ethos. It's run by Father Peter Heers. He's actually an American. And he was living in Greece as a priest for a long time, but he's back in the US. So the Orthodox Ethos, I don't remember the name of the book. I'd have to look it up.
Okay.
But it is not easy to come by. But he talks about it on his channel, and he did this during COVID. And so he talks a lot about parallels as well. He might have done it in 2021, but he kind of goes through the history of like a lot of these people, a lot of these saints, what happened to the Orthodox Church, like under Bolshevism, like the Soviet Union, like all the stuff that happened in the Russian Revolution. And yeah, it was very eye-opening, and I learned a lot. I learned a lot about the history from Father Peter Heers.
Right. Well, and you can, I mean, your channel, and I do love your channel. Your episodes are great, but I do love hearing your bits about the saints, even though I'm not Orthodox myself. But it's a lot of history, and it's always really excellent to hear people's faithfulness and, you know, the kind of part that they had to play, even when, you know, communism and everything else was running rampant, and that also that many of them have the same problems just keeping the crew together, which I forget what the name of the last saint that you had, but that was one of the things that's just like dissension in the ranks was a huge issue, even when you should have perhaps more been worried about persecution from outside, that it was always the little internal squabbles that.
Yeah, that was Patriarch Tikhon, who, and I did not know this, before. Like, I'd heard of him, but he was actually a bishop in the United States. Like, he was sent to Alaska and basically ran the Russian Orthodox Church in North America.
I'll have to catch up on your episodes to get this history lesson, and I'm gonna go listen to the other guy too, because
I think it's like not very many people know who these saints are, because the history just hasn't gotten out there, and that's why I've really tried to talk about them. Like, I may go further back in time and talk about some others, but I think these stories are really important because it really wasn't that long ago.
Right.
And one of the saints I talked about, Father Maximovich, like, he was an archbishop in San Francisco for a long time, and his tomb is there, like, at the cathedral in San Francisco.
I didn't mean to get this into like all onto, now it's all about religion. Forget knitting. Let's talk religion. No. But it's just so interesting. There's just so much I had no idea about.
Yeah, well, and it's Orthodoxy has been really small in the US, and it's been mostly an immigrant religion of the various Slavs, the Greeks, who have immigrated. But there, over the last probably 20 years, have been a lot of converts from your generic American stock. And there's all these parishes and missions that are popping up, especially all over the South and Appalachia. I mean, it's small, but it's noticeable enough that NPR did a hit piece on Orthodoxy, especially the Russian church outside Russia. I guess it was last summer.
Well, probably they're all spies, right? Isn't that it? Why else is there a Russian Orthodox church?
Like, we're all communist spies or something. I'm like, no, you do not understand the history, because there was a split, and so there was the subverted church in the Soviet Union, and then there was everyone else who was had to get out and got away.
Yeah.
And they didn't get back into communion until the 2000s.
Interesting.
The rocky history.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to go listen to the guy. I didn't write it down, but you told us, so I'll find it.
Yeah.
But what else do we want to know about you? I hit the wrong button. Something happened. It was trying to give me a background all of a sudden. I don't know what I did. But so you've been doing your knitting, you've been doing your channel, you work, you have kids, you're a busy lady. How come you decided to start, why did you want to become the John Hancock of the Knitting Wars? Why you have a lot going on. What made you be like, hey, this is also a fabulous idea?
Well,
what made you get in the fight?
Yeah.
It's one of those things where I'm like, I've long kind of gone against the grain, because I was not raised Christian, and then I became Christian as an adult, and that kind of caused issues with my family. And so in a lot of respects, I'm like, I gave up having the perfect relationship with my family. And so I'm just like, well, why do you think I care what these other people think? Because I don't care what my own parents think. And I think that's part of it, is just being a little contrarian. Um, and also, I'm not the best at confrontation, but like, you know, supporting people in the background is something I'm pretty good at. And so I've been doing that for a long time, and I've made so many friends because of that. So it's been,
Well, and also, I mean, kind of to bring back the community angle of it, like that is something you excel at because, I mean, even now that you've started a podcast, you were always like, okay, where are my people? Where's the group? Let's get together, let's chat. I'm going to pay attention to what you're doing. I'm going to pay attention to what you're doing. Like it's like, okay, we're a different group. Great. Let's make sure that there's still a core of the group that we're still around for each other. I mean, you can even see that like you're great in the knitting wars, knitting world, everything else. But when Carrie started being on Friday Night Tights, you're like, awesome, great. Who are these people? All right, support these people. If they're good people, I support them. I'm with them. You were recently at a meetup. You're like, okay, it's the sort it's kind of, I don't know, it kind of it lessens it to say networking, but it is networking. People need people, and finding other people is very important. Even,
yeah,
if
no
you're
man
on
can be an
camera.
island. And, my husband, like, I think if he wasn't married, like, he would be a hermit. But even he admits that people need people. And so when we were looking at places, to eventually end up, and we ended up there a lot sooner than we thought we would, I mean, we talked about where. And, there are a lot of places where you could like homestead or whatever that's very remote and far from people. And we chose someplace that's rural, but but it's not remote. Like you have neighbors that are not that far. And granted, I don't know all of my neighbors very well because everyone works hard. And but we do have there. We go into town. Like the kids do stuff in town. Like there are people there, and so like there's that social structure that we can rely on. And I think as women, like we're good, relatively speaking, at building relationships. And I really like what Gary at Neurotic, what they call it a fellowship. Not a community, it's a fellowship. And I think that's really what we've built in knitting, in our little corner of the knitting world, is we have a fellowship. Like we support each other. Like we're not going to stab each other in the back because someone said the wrong thing. And decide to cancel someone else. And sitting back and watching like the people on the other side of the knitting wars, like they're all going after each other now because they can't really go after us. Right. Like because we have that fellowship.
Right.
And yes, I am a Lord of the Rings nerd. There's nothing wrong with it. There are a lot of great lessons to learn. But
yeah, no, the people
we will
on the
not
other
break
side,
the bonds of fellowship.
But I think on the other side, they're learning that you can only cancel somebody who allows you to cancel them. So like they can say anything they want to about me, Ann, Neil, you, Tabitha. Like, nope, we don't care. Like it doesn't matter. But when Anne was talking about all the things that you do to bring everybody together, I'm sitting here thinking, and you're a self-described introvert. So how did you get that role? Like,
I don't know. I think maybe I'm a well-adjusted introvert.
yeah, I think that you have to do life. And so, but
yeah.
just...
And like one of the things, like, and I don't know that I'm sort of traditional, in a lot of ways. And so I kind of like, I joke with my husband. I'm like, when I grow up, I want to be a babushka. And of course he kind of laughs and is also slightly terrified because in Eastern Europe, like the babushka, she's the grandma. Like she gets after everybody. And and especially like the men, like she'll tell them what to do around the house and they'll do it because she's babushka. But she will also feed you, love you, make sure that you're well clothed, well fed, and all that. And like the babushka, like when she was young, she was building those relationships. She got married, she had babies, she took care of everybody and built those relationships when she was young. And so, like, when she is older and is the babushka, of course, everyone's going to, listen to her, even if they're annoyed with her for getting after them about things, because she's earned it. Like, she's taken care of everybody. She's built those relationships. She's gained wisdom through her life. And, maybe she'll smack a young man on the side of the head, like, you need to go do this. And he might complain, but everyone loves her because she'll feed him.
Right. It's kind of a similar concept with a little bit different culture shift. There was a Japanese movie called Summer Wars. I don't know if you're familiar, but part of it is there's some big cyber attack, and it's very anime. And that the Everything app in Japan has this big cyber attack against it. And anyways, that it's focused on this one particular family. And anyways, it ends up that because one of them is really good at online gaming, they're able to defeat the supercomputer. But that, a relevant side point. But part of the story was that all of the utilities for the country were connected to this super app. So they were all shut down when everything went haywire with the virus. But little Japanese grandma, who, is now the matriarch and the head of the entire family, she got on the phone because the phone lines still work. And she knew a relative that worked for this phone company, and she knew a relative that worked for this utility. And she also knew them well enough to know that when she was on the phone with this person, she was like, oh, well, honey, wouldn't it be nice, couldn't you do this and help me? Or, you do this to, help the people that you work with. And then she'd get on the phone with somebody else and be like, you tell that man, you tell him that he gets up there and he fixes that. And she was able to, again, to have those community bonds, to be there for people, encourage them when they need encouraging, slap them upside the head when they need that. And I think that we forget, and that it was very clear, the analogy of his, like, yeah, the internet was your community, but this woman's community was her community. So she was able to have those connections. And that, with the internet, we forget this, like, no, human beings are the most important thing. Like, things are important. Things are great. Property is important. But things are important because people are important. People aren't important because things are important. That, even though human resources is a lame line, that's like, no, it's more important to know people than it is to have stuff. And, not just from a, advantageous way, but from a, no, it's good to, help people and be helped in return when you need it. That, again, people need people.
Yeah. And I think what a lot of, especially modern women don't really get or understand with these more traditional gender roles and kind of like these more traditional societies, or men are men and women are women, and they have their areas. They seem to think that, oh, the patriarchy is oppressing them. And it's like, have you seen any of these old ladies? And do you really think in these places, do you really think that the men are oppressing these women? No, they are not. Because these women, they have their domain where they're in charge, and the men will listen to them and do what she says. Like the babushka and like your nice little Japanese grandma. Like, probably none of those men were going to mess around with her. They probably did what she told them to do. And then she probably made sure that they were well fed at the end of the day.
Well,
But
I mean,
like they don't get that. Like they have these more traditional societies, like the men have their domain, the women have their domain, and they rule those domains. And when they're in the other, like they will defer to the other. And it's in those societies, it's the women running the household, which is an economic unit. And like you listen to your mom or you listen to your grandma and you do what she says in her home because she runs the place. And
right.
trust me, her husband probably does what she tells him to do, even though he's the big patriarchal man.
Right. But that's the thing that people don't understand. They think that if a woman submits to a man, that she's trodden down. I admit I submit to my husband on most things. When it comes to house stuff, when it comes to the kids and their schooling or what we're going to do with them, I tell him. And sometimes if he doesn't agree with me, we'll have a discussion. But generally, if I say we're doing X, Y, and Z when it comes to these things because I'm in charge of it, he just says, okay, good deal. Like, you know what I mean? And people don't understand that. Just because I submit to him. He has the full-time job. I do not. So when he says we're going to spend our money on this or we're going to go here, or I say, okay. Once in a while, if I don't feel like doing something he says, I'll say, I don't really feel like doing that. And he'll listen to me because I'm not constantly pushing him. But that's a relationship. Like he doesn't dominate me. I don't dominate him, but we have our things that we do that we're good at. And that's normal. And that's part of the problem with the whole feminism and the whole bunch of shit.
And
sorry.
And I would also, sorry to interrupt, but the verse where it says, husbands love your wives, wives submit to your husbands, but also in that passage, it's submit ye to one another. That's like, hey, maybe it's not all about you all the time. And, maybe someone else should listen to you, but also it's like, hey, listen to each other. Sometimes it's someone else's place to lead. That's okay. And sometimes it's your place to lead. You're not always going to be the bottom of this rung, but also don't be prideful. Don't be, it's like, okay, you're in charge here. Okay. I'm in charge here. You have these different levels of hierarchy, and I don't know. In many cases, it's much better to recognize the hierarchy than it is to in your own place in it than it is to necessarily usurp it unless it's unjust.
Yeah, and like the line that is also frequently conveniently omitted is like, husbands, love your wives as Christ loves the church. Well, what did Jesus do for the church? He emptied himself and he died for the church. That's a lot of love.
Yeah.
Right.
And but we live in a society now where if it's seen that, so I raise my kids, I clean my house, I do the laundry very poorly. I cook passively, but you know what I mean? But people see that and they're like, oh, she is downtrodden. No, I am lucky to have a husband who said to me, let's not do what everybody else is doing because look at how their lives are. And I said, thank God, this is perfect. I'm so happy because it's anyway, I didn't mean to get off on that, but that's the whole babushka thing. Women have their, feminism has made women think that, oh, if I'm not a CEO, I'm not worthwhile. No, some women, that's their path. That's fantastic. But also some women have just as much impact or maybe more in their lives, doing their thing, running their community and their house and that's okay. That was my point.
And also there, sorry, I don't mean to talk over you, Tara. Go ahead.
No, it's okay. No, you go, Anne.
No, I was just going to divert slightly, but it's, of all of the, epidemics that we have, all of the issues that we have, sometimes I wonder if we're not just suffering from a lack of earnestness as people. That if you say it's like, no, I genuinely care about people and I want to help them, or, I really care about my family. I really care about raising kids. I really care about volunteering. It's like, no, I love my community and I want to do good things for it. Then you get kind of a half laugh. It's like, no, I really genuinely like putting good food on the table and having people enjoy it. What? No. That, and not that we don't joke and are sarcastic, but we're that you almost don't take that seriously, and all you have many people who are lacking a sort of meaning, but at the same time they don't allow themselves to have meaning, or they don't, have a goal and sincerely go for it because, oh, of course that's not a thing that, it's like, oh, well, that would be a silly thing to do, I don't do that, that they're, laughing themselves out of a purpose almost. And I mean, in religion too, that it's like that, it's like, no, I take my faith seriously. And people are like, oh, well, that's silly. Like, it really isn't. That you have these principles that, we live in such an insincere society that we're almost not allowed to have them. And it seems like a weird thing when you push back a little, like, no, no, I believe this.
Yeah. It's like society is expecting you to identify as things, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you are. I'm like, no, I am. Like, I am an Eastern Orthodox Christian and all that comes along with it, good and bad. I am a woman and all the good and bad that comes from that. I am a knitter and crocheter and all the good and bad that comes with that. Like, I don't identify as anything. If I put on a costume and I cosplay, then I will identify.
Okay.
I used to have a Hobbit costume back before I got married and stuff. And yes, I have gone to places as a Hobbit because I'm short.
You are. I met you in person at Devon's retreat. You are quite short. Just saying.
And you are quite tall.
Anne is abnormally tall though for a woman. So I don't know how much I believe her.
I'm short.
But I don't know. I think that that's a very lovely way to sum up you. You are all the things that come with it. And is there anything else you wanted to talk about before we wrapped ourselves up? That wasn't how I meant to say that, but you know what I mean.
I don't think so. I really like love and appreciate the fellowship that we've built over the last few years. And both of you have been an important part of that. And it's kind of funny because like so many of us have started podcasts, fairly recently, but I think it's because of this fellowship that we had. And it's really fun. And like I'm trying to keep up with everybody and eventually I'll get there. Kind of like with all the yarn. It's like, well, eventually I'll knit it all up someday.
Yeah.
But it's been good. Like the last few years have been absolutely crazy. And I don't know that it's going to get any better anytime soon. But that's okay because what I've gained from all of this has been invaluable. And I wouldn't give it up for anything. So I love both of you. So thank you.
Oh, thank you.
I love you too, Tara. You and all your John Hancockness.
I know, right? Thank you for being John Hancock and for organizing all this stuff and making it like, getting everybody together, prodding Anne into these groups because I just follow Anne. If you tell Anne to go do something, I go there too. Because I'm not as social media savvy as she is, believe it or not.
I don't know that I'm all that savvy either, but I'm like, I have my peeps and I'm happy.
Yeah, no, it's great. And we have a good community and yeah, it's just excellent. So I'm glad you're part of it. So before we go, enter to win Chicken Lady's ornament kit. Comment on this video. It's got all kinds of fun stuff in here. You can use the code baby20PIK to get 20% off of anything in her shop. make sure you sign up for her newsletter, because like if there happens to be an extra random Monday in a month, she usually gives out like free shipping, but you have to be on the list to know about the special stuff. So yeah,
Exactly.
do that.
And also check out beautiful yarns that she has. And she also, I don't have a skein with me, it's across the room, but she also has a fantastic colorway called Blackety Black, which may or may not be important for an upcoming knitting challenge that we will have October and November. So hint, hint, nudge, nudge. But also check her out again. Promo code baby20PIK for 20% off your order. Her stuff is fantastic. We love Lynn.
We do. She's part of this community too that we adore. So it's great.
Yes.
And I'm glad Tara's here, and I'm glad everybody watching is here, because it wouldn't be anything without everybody doing this and joining us. So thanks for doing that, and we will see you next time.
Yeah. Well, thanks for inviting me. It was fun.
Thanks. All right. Bye, guys.
Bye.